Nuclear energy isn't just an interesting part of science, it may be the key to saving our world. Among the alternatives to environmentally destructive fossil fuels, nuclear power is the one that can fully replace the reliance on coal and gas plants. But it hasn't reached its full potential yet. In today's video, we'll examine some of the most interesting developments in this field. First up, new reactor coolants. Water is the gold standard coolant in most applications today, and with good reason. There's a lot of it, and it's relatively sustainable. New research into coolants, however, is turning up some interesting replacements for water. Two promising examples are molten salt and liquid metal. Work is ongoing to produce them at the scale required for nuclear reactors, and if the industry can mass produce them, it would have big benefits for reactors. While we wait for molten salt and liquid metal to be produced at scale, there are coolant options for which the production is already there. Helium is a gas that's made all over the world for various applications, and it has potential to replace water as a reactor coolant. Not only is it safer than molten salt or liquid metal, it may well be safer than water. And the heat exchange apparatus required for gas cooling can be built on a smaller scale, allowing for smaller and more versatile nuclear reactors. The key to the potential of these coolants is a more efficient heat transfer, which raises the ceiling for how hot reactors can be run. Not only could we squeeze more power out of the reactors, the risk of reactor failure and accidents goes down. Safer and more powerful reactors? Sounds like a win to us. Next, we have TRISO fuel. We've talked about the possibility of operating nuclear reactors at higher temperatures, but there is an issue with that: melting fuel. Molten salt and gas coolants can allow reactors to run at a high enough temperature where the very fuel rods the reactors depend on would be the limiting factor. This new generation of reactors requires a new generation of fuel, and TRISO fuel could be the answer. TRISO stands for tri-structural isotropic fuel, and it is produced in the form of pellet particles. A core of uranium, carbon, and oxygen are coated in 3 layers of carbon and ceramic coating. This structure allows it to withstand higher temperatures, and it also protects the fuel from other effects that hinder the performance of typical fuel rods. The coating protects the core from neutron irradiation, corrosion, and oxidation, so the fuel can reliably maintain its peak performance. TRISO fuel is being tested in reactors in China and Japan, with plans to begin testing in the US. It has turned out promising results, and it could indeed be the future of nuclear fuel. Now for additive manufacturing. Additive manufacturing is a complicated sounding term, but what it basically means is 3D printing on an industrial scale. New reactor designs are being explored where the components are simple enough to basically be 3D printed and assembled. Does that mean you could print out your own reactor? Sadly, no. It does mean that basically any additive-based plant could start producing parts for nuclear reactors, making them easier to manufacture and maintain. Given how expensive it is to commission a nuclear reactor right now, this would simplify production and bring costs down to a much more manageable scale. Additive manufacturing could be a big factor in making nuclear energy accessible to all, even countries that wouldn't be able to afford today's traditional reactors. Next is small modular reactors, SMRs. One of the drawbacks of nuclear energy as it's currently produced is the size of the nuclear reactors. As you can imagine, the bigger they are, the more expensive they are to build and run. The risk of an accident is higher, and when one of these larger reactors goes down, it becomes a huge strain on the grid. That's where small modular reactors, or SMRs, come in. SMRs in development today will be rated to produce 300 megawatts or less of electricity, which is a lot less than the gigawatt average of a full-size plant. That being said, it's still powerful enough that a pair of them can run a small city. They could also replace the big nuclear facilities in general, since a cluster of small reactors would be a more robust system than a few big ones. Combined with the ease of producing these reactors, SMRs are poised to replace the powerhouses we know today, and this could definitely be the future of nuclear energy. Now, onto micro-reactors. But what if we could shrink nuclear reactors even further? Are we risking a visit from the physics law police? Turns out that the science behind nuclear energy is so versatile that you can scale a reactor way down to 1% of the size of a typical reactor and still get up to 10 megawatts of electricity out of them. These micro-reactors are in development as we speak, and they have really interesting potential applications. A single one of these can power a rural town or village, which could save the trouble of rigging a distribution network from a powerhouse to a remote location. They can provide emergency power to areas hit by disaster. You could put the especially small micro-reactors, the ones that produce around 5 megawatts, in places like hospitals or on airplanes and ships, replacing the need for generators and turbines. A nuclear reactor for every application will certainly make fossil fuels totally obsolete. Up next, deep isolation. If you're interested in nuclear energy at all, you've probably witnessed or taken part in plenty of arguments about nuclear waste. The waste produced from the process of nuclear fission is the Achilles heel of nuclear energy generation. It's highly radioactive and presents a conundrum of where it can be stored without posing a risk to humans and the environment. Right now, the best solution we've set on is burying it in underground pits. But what if we could bury it even deeper? There used to be a concern about the large tunnels that would have to be dug to do this, but that problem might just have a solution. In 2019, the California startup Deep Isolation pioneered a solution to the problem that was pretty much staring at us right in the face. The oil and gas industry has spent centuries coming up with ways to drill underground and analyze the conditions below the surface, and Deep Isolation's idea is to use that technology to bury nuclear waste. By using horizontal directional drilling tools, which are bread and butter in oil and gas, large canisters of waste can be stored far below the surface, where it wouldn't threaten anyone or anything. Deep Isolation successfully demonstrated their concept in 2019, and while they did so with a smaller canister, they think it's absolutely possible with larger canisters too. According to their estimate, 300 boreholes with tunnels around 2 miles long could store most of the US's waste. Between extracting useful materials from waste and then safely storing the waste long term, it sure sounds like the solution to this age-old problem is close at hand. We can't wait for those arguments to finally stop. And finally, nuclear fusion. For all the advancements that have been made and are going to be made in nuclear fission, the insane new advancement we're all waiting for is the advent of nuclear fusion reactors. It's the ideal of energy generation, totally green with no waste. But it has always been out of reach, the light at the end of the tunnel that the nuclear energy industry has been striving towards. You might wonder though, how close are we in the present day? Well, just back in April 2022, scientists at England's Joint European Torus didn't just break the record of most energy produced in a sustained fusion reaction, they split it like an atom, 59 megajoules over a period of 5 seconds. That's 11.8 megawatts produced in one experimental reactor. There's no doubt that the sheer amount of energy we can produce through nuclear fusion is growing, but the real triumph of this experiment is that, at long last, there's a material that can be used in the inner walls of a reactor that won't leak out any of the insane heat required for fusion. So, the Joint European Torus, or JET, is sitting pretty as the most advanced and capable fusion reactor in the world, but it may be about to lose its crown. Development at MIT is full steam, and their reactor ITER is slated to be operational in 2027. It will incorporate all the advances of JET and take them even further. The fusion chamber will be 8 times the size of JET's, and it will use superconducting magnets to contain and control the plasma produced during the reaction. Clearly, ITER is poised to smash JET's record of energy generated and time, but the team at MIT is hoping to do something even more insane. For the first time in the history of nuclear fusion development, ITER could produce more energy than is actually spent to operate it. Simulations show that ITER could produce 500 megawatts of power for 400 seconds, while only requiring 50 megawatts of energy to heat up the fuel. That means that ITER could output 10 times the amount of energy required for the actual process, something JET could only dream of. JET and ITER represent massive steps forward for nuclear fusion, even if it'll take a decade or two more to see them used to power our homes. And that concludes our look at current developments in the world of nuclear energy. Do you have any interesting facts to share? Do any of these breakthroughs make you feel confident about nuclear power? Sound off in the comments below. See you in the next one.